Welcome to the Healing Light Wellness Podcast. I'm Charlene Smart, a holistic healer specializing in emotional freedom technique and energy healing. My purpose in this world is to bring healing and peace into the lives of women just like you. This show is meant to be a journey of self-discovery, healing, and growth while introducing you to new techniques and strategies to help you live a more peaceful and happy life. So I have heard the most perfect F word used this week. And no, I am not talking about a curse word. So earlier this week, we had National Picnic Day. And so one of my social media posts was obviously in regards to National Picnic Day. And I decided I'd like to play a game. Do you know that old game where you sit around with a bunch of friends and you say, I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to take, and you start with the letter A. Everyone picks apple, right? And then we all continue to add what we're going to bring. Well, I decided that this week we would take a healing picnic and bring healing words. And of course, I started. So I had A. I said, I'm going on a picnic and I'm going to bring acceptance. Now, this post has completely exploded, which just brings my heart so much joy. It was way more than I was expecting. But we have had this great group of women who just continue to add letters, and it's been the most amazing words. And this morning, one of these gals had said she had the letter F, and she was bringing forgiveness. And I thought, holy mackerel, that is the perfect F word. And as soon as I said that, what popped into my head? Yes, you're guessing it. Not the nicest of F words. But instead of thinking that, I want you to think about the F word being forgiveness. And when we think about forgiveness, I'm wondering what's the first thing that comes to your mind. Is it somebody who needs forgiveness? Somebody who you know you need to forgive? That's the first thing that popped into my head as well. But what if we remember that there's one other person who we are not so quick to forgive, but that needs and wants forgiveness? Can you guess who that person is? It's us. We can and should offer ourselves forgiveness, but we don't. That's one of the hardest places to offer forgiveness. Even when forgiveness is difficult to give and accept, it's still something that we should do. I experienced this in my own life. So a couple of years ago, my son was actually in his sophomore year of school, and things are a struggle. He was on cancer treatment for 3 years, back when he was 4. And so the chemo was actually injected directly into his spine. That chemo going directly into his spine actually caused him to have some processing speed issues. He also walked away with some ADD, so focusing is uber difficult, and add that with a slower processing speed. And as you can imagine, school was definitely not his thing. And so, we spent years and years just struggling to get him through school. And in his sophomore year, things kind of came to a head. Him and I were driving to school one day, and we were talking about what needed to be turned in, what needed to be completed, so that he could pass his classes. Of course, these conversations are nothing new to us. This is something we have dealt with his entire school life, and it's usually fraught with anger and tears and sadness, and every emotion that you can imagine feeling comes up. And as we're driving to school, of course, we're there again. And suddenly he says, I'm sorry. And I thought, well, what are you sorry about? And I pulled over because him and I needed to finish this conversation. He said, I'm sorry, I'm such a problem at school. And I said, no problem. It's okay. We've got this. And I asked him to remember why is school such a struggle? Because again, we've had this conversation multiple times, and we never wanted him to feel as if it was his fault. Now, we all know he could have tried harder. We get that. But this wasn't his fault. He didn't set out or ask to be a problem in school. So we have come to the conclusion that the reason I am this way is because of cancer treatment, which through the years has definitely helped. So again, I moved forward and said, Ryan, tell me why you struggle in school, because he was taking this very personally and really down on himself and just saying hurtful things. And so he said, it's because I had cancer. And I said, yeah, exactly, dude. It's because you had cancer. And he starts to cry and he says, I'm sorry again. And I said, what are you sorry about? You have nothing to be sorry for. And he says, I'm sorry I had cancer. Now, as a mom, I'm completely floored by this. Again, this is not a new conversation for us. And in the past, I tend to say, it's not your fault. You have nothing to be sorry for. I love you. You were fantastic. You're strong. You're amazing. But I never really hear him out. And he is just bawling. And of course, mom's bawling as well, having a hard time holding it together right now. And he keeps saying it. He keeps saying, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry that I put you guys through this. And I'm literally sitting there with my jaw open. My son is apologizing for one, having cancer, for two, putting us through all of this. So I asked him to elaborate. What have you put us through? Well, I'm really bad in school and you're constantly fighting with the teachers, and I made you guys spend so much time in the hospital and all of my treatments, and you were so scared. And I literally could not say anything as he is just ticking through all of these things that he is sorry for. And in true mom fashion, I begin to say, you have nothing to apologize for. You didn't do this. It was something that happened to you. To which he continued to simply say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. In that moment, finally, I stopped and I said, okay, Shar, if this was a client sitting in front of you, what would you say? Because you darn sure wouldn't say, it's not your fault. You have nothing to be sorry for. I might add that, but what would you say? And I realized in that moment that I needed to offer him forgiveness. I needed to forgive him, which even now makes my stomach turn, because I truly do not believe that he has anything that he needs to be forgiven for. But nonetheless, instead of fighting it, I shoved my nausea down and I said, Ryan, I'm going to say this, but I need you to understand I do not believe you need it. And I said, honey boy, I forgive you. To which he began to cry harder. And I thought, this is it. Ding, 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 Shar. All of these years, this is what this poor kid has needed. So I continued. Ryan, I forgive you for struggling in school. I forgive you for putting us through every treatment you had over the 3 years. I forgive you for all of my sleepless nights and my fear-filled days. I forgive you for having cancer. And as hard as it is right now to even share this with you, that moment was filled with so much emotion. When I got done with all of my forgiveness, and he is crying harder than I have seen him in many, many years, I said, I forgive you. can you forgive yourself? To my bewilderment, the tears and the emotions continued to increase. I truly didn't think there was any more emotion left in that kid, but there was. And I asked him again when he took a breath. I said, can you forgive yourself for all of those things? And he waited, and I wondered, did I do the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? I mean, I could totally be wrecking this for him, causing him more pain, which is so not what I want to do. But I waited in silence, which is somewhat difficult for me sometimes. And finally, he looked at me as the tears began to slow and the sobbing quieted. And I asked one more time, handsome, can you forgive yourself? And he said, I think so. I said, okay. We sat there on the side of the road for another few minutes. And he said, Mom, I can forgive myself. You would not believe the change in this kid. Now, we did not become a straight A student and suddenly life was perfect. But what happened was he began to take his life back. School was still difficult and he still had to try and we still struggled, but we no longer had the outbursts that we were having. We no longer said things like, I hate myself, I'm dumb, I'm stupid. It was no longer hurting him because I had forgiven him. Now, I do not believe he needed to be forgiven, but it didn't matter what I believed. And as a practitioner, I would have realized that years before I did. But as a mom, I missed it. Now, this wasn't the end of the story. There was still one more person who needed forgiveness, and that person was me. So I took some time and realized that I didn't purposefully set out to hurt him. I actually thought I was doing what was best for my son. I mean, in all seriousness, how could you hold a 4-year-old responsible for having cancer? This didn't matter. I didn't provide what he needed at the time. But once I figured out what he needed, I was there to give it to him. I realized I could have carried around the pain and even shame of not giving him what he needed years ago. Instead, I chose to sit in the pain for just a moment and chose to offer myself forgiveness. And my dear, there is freedom in forgiveness. I want you to know if there is somebody out there who is in need of forgiveness. Sometimes the most healing thing we can do, if it is possible, is to offer it. Ultimately, the most important part of that F word, forgiveness, lies in internal forgiveness. Now, do I believe that my offering our son forgiveness could have had an impact? Most definitely. But I do not believe that had he not chose to forgive himself, he would not have become the man he is today. See, he was completely buried in the shroud of shame and just guilt. It kept him from living his life even at 13, 14 years old. The power in the F word is internal forgiveness. Today, I want you to consider what you have on your plate in your past, what you're facing right now that you may need to give yourself forgiveness. Will it be easy? Absolutely not. Will you sob through it and let the tears roll? Maybe. Sometimes we see bravery as those moments of how much can I carry? But my dear, being brave is not bottling it up, shoving it down and carrying it around for the next 20 years. Bravery is taking back your control over it, saying you can no longer control me. That's the brave part of you. And my dear, You are way braver than you think. If you're struggling with the F word today, whether it's for yourself or someone else, I encourage you to schedule a session with me. I would love to help you break free from this bond. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and feel free to reach out to me anytime. I love Facebook and Instagram and can be found at Healing Light Wellness Online, or you can always email me at charlene@healinglightwellness.com. Until we meet again, may your days be filled with love and light.